History is often written by the victors, but the ancient truth is etched in the ruins. Of those who thought they were gods, she did not come to Israel to be a queen. She came to be an architect of a new, dark reality. The story of Jezebel begins not in the holy hills of Samaria, but in the salt-stained ports of Phoenicia. Imagine a world where the Mediterranean waves crashed against ancient limestone ports, where the air was thick with the heavy cloying scent of frankincense and myrrh, rising continually to foreign gods. Jezebel was born into the heart of an occult dynasty, the daughter of Ethbaal, a man whose name literally means "with Baal." He was not just a king, he was a high priest who murdered his own way to the throne. This was the religious worldview she carried in her veins, a world where temple prostitution was sacred, and where the storm god, Baal, was believed to hold the keys to life and death. When King Ahab of Israel looked north, he did not see a spiritual threat. He saw gold. He saw cedar. He saw a political alliance that would secure his borders. But when you invite a queen to your throne, you invite her demons to your table. The marriage was not a union of hearts. It was a spiritual contract that signed away the soul of a nation. Before we dive more, kindly like this video and subscribe to my channel for more ancient truth. The arrival of Jezebel was not merely a royal wedding. It was a tactical, spiritual infiltration. To understand why this was so disastrous, we must look at the city she left behind. Sidon, a city of merchants and masters of the sea. The Phoenicians were not just traders of purple cloth. They were exporters of an ancient dark religion. Jezebel's father, Ethbaal, had seized the throne by murdering the previous king. He was a man who believed that power belonged only to those who were ruthless enough to take it. This was the truth Jezebel brought to Israel. A truth that said, the king is above the law. The king is a god, and the people are merely tools. When she entered the gates of Samaria, she did not come alone. She brought 450 prophets of the storm god, Baal, and 400 prophets of the fertility goddess, Asherah. Think of the logistics of such an occupation. These were not just priests. They were agents of influence. They moved into the high places. They took over the schools. They began to whisper to the youth of Israel that the old ways, the ways of the Torah, were restrictive. They promised liberation. They promised prosperity. They promised that Baal would bring the rain and the riches and the pleasure that the God of Israel supposedly denied them. Ahab was a man of weak character who fell for the modern allure of his wife's religion. He built her a temple. He built her an altar in the very land where the 10 Commandments were given. The smoke of child sacrifice and temple prostitution began to rise. This is the ancient truth of compromise. It never stays small. It begins with a marriage. It ends with a massacre of the soul. Jezebel did not just want a seat at the table. She wanted to break the table and build her own. The drought was not a natural disaster. It was a divine eviction notice. For 3.5 years, the clouds were locked. Imagine the desperation of a nation that has traded its God for a storm god who cannot make it rain. The irony was thick, like the dust in the streets of Jezreel. Baal was the god of lightning, the god of the clouds, the master of the harvest, and yet he sat silent while the children of Israel starved. Then comes the day of the ultimate confrontation, Mount Carmel, a jagged limestone ridge overlooking the blue Mediterranean. On one side, the 850 prophets of the Queen, dressed in ornate robes, smelling of expensive incense. On the other side, one man, Elijah. He was a man of the desert, a man who spoke to ravens, a man who did not care for the fashion or the favor of the palace. He looked at the people who were standing there, silent. How long? Will you limp between two opinions? The Hebrew word there implies a bird, hopping from one branch to another, never settling, never choosing. The prophets of Baal went first. They danced, they screamed, they cut themselves until the blood ran down the stones. From morning until noon, from noon until the evening sacrifice, nothing, only the sound of the wind and the mocking voice of the Tishbite. Then Elijah repaired the altar. He used 12 stones, one for each tribe. He was reminding them of who they were before they met Jezebel. He poured the water once, twice, 3 times, and then he prayed. He did not scream. He did not cut himself. He spoke to the God of Abraham, and the sky literally tore open. The fire of the Lord was not a flame. It was a weapon of mass destruction against the lie of Baal. It consumed the wood. It consumed the rocks. It licked up the water. And in that moment, the nation fell on its face. The Lord, He is God. We come now to the darkest chapter, the vineyard of Naboth. This was not just a land dispute. It was a clash of 2 worlds. Naboth was a man of the soil, a man who understood that his land was not his property. It was a sacred trust from the Almighty. Under the ancient truth of the Torah, land could not be sold permanently. It belonged to the family, to the tribe, to the future. But Jezebel came from a world where the king's whim was the only law. When Ahab pouted, when he refused to eat, because he could not have what did not belong to him, Jezebel mocked him. "Are you not the king?" she asked. "Arise, eat bread, and let your heart be merry. I will get you the vineyard." Think of the chill in those words. She was not offering a gift. She was promising a crime. She wrote letters in the king's name. She used the king's seal. This is the anatomy of the Jezebel Spirit. It uses the appearance of authority to commit acts of lawlessness. She ordered a fast, a religious ceremony, to hide a judicial murder. She hired 2 scoundrels, 2 sons of Belial, to lie. They accused Naboth of cursing God and the king. The sentence was stoning. Imagine the scene. Naboth dragged outside the city walls, the very stones of Israel being used to crush a man for his faithfulness. When the blood had dried and the stones were still, Jezebel stood before Ahab. "Arise, take possession." But as Ahab walked into the vineyard, he found that he was not alone. The prophet Elijah was standing in the shadows. The word of the Lord had found them. Have you killed and also taken possession? Judgment was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. Justice, in the eyes of the Lord, is never late. Years had passed. Ahab was dead, his blood licked up by dogs, exactly as the prophecy declared. But Jezebel still sat on the throne, through her sons, still manipulating, still weaving her web of idolatry. Then comes Jehu, a man anointed for one purpose, to be the broom of destruction. He rode into Jezreel like a whirlwind. Jezebel heard the thunder, none of the chariot wheels. She did not repent. She did not hide. She painted her eyes. She tied her head. She stepped to the window. It was a final act of defiant royalty. She looked down and mocked the man God had sent to end her reign. "Throw her down!" The command was instantaneous. Her own attendants, the ones who had served her every whim, were the ones who pushed her. She fell from the height of her pride to the dirt of the street, and the prophecy was completed. When they went to bury her, there was nothing left but the extremities. This is the ancient truth of the end of pride. But listen closely. The spirit of Jezebel did not die in the streets of Jezreel. It moved, it adapted, it waited. In the book of Revelation, we see it again in the church of Thyatira, a spirit that calls itself a prophetess, but teaches God's people to compromise. We see it in our modern world, when leaders choose the favor of the world over the truth of the word. When the family order is dismantled in the name of progress. When the church begins to look exactly like the culture it was meant to transform. The question for you in this final hour is one of discernment. Will you be like Ahab, passive and silent? Or will you be like Elijah, standing for the truth, even when the world is screaming against you? The Baals of this age are demanding your worship, but the Lord, the God of Elijah, is still the God of fire. Choose whom you will serve. Choose wisely, for the ancient truth never changes.